There is concern about the labor side of the equation, but also just still about the infrastructure and what's needed to shift a lot of those goods.
Absolutely. As you guys said, it came with great relief today, the official announcement. It was expected, but the negotiations would continue despite the fact that the contract has expired for these dock workers. It was supposed to expire at about 8 p.m. Eastern time today. So it looks like the talks will go on. There will not be disruptions, but the fact remains that everyone's very much on edge. Warehouses are packed to the roof. The rail lines aren't still operating properly. Everyone's remembering the peak ships when there were over 100 boats waiting outside Los Angeles and Long Beach in January, and now it's peak season. So all the goods for going back to school, for the holidays coming up, they start coming in right about now through August. And so really these talks come at a really delicate time. The union has a lot of leverage, and it really remains to be seen how they're going to try and resolve the contract talks and come to a conclusion.
A delicate time for those talks, a delicate time for the supply chain. And I have a pretty simple question, which is, how are we still dealing with these issues? I mean, because really this has been the story for over 2 years now. What is there to look forward to? What could finally sort of tilt the balance?
I think a lot of experts say that, there have been these issues all along. There wasn't as much attention. We had Trump's tariffs that sort of exposed some weaknesses, some, a few breakages in the seams. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit and supply chains were completely upended, it really exposed all of these problems that were sort of below the surface at this point. So there's a lot of rethinking now. Should we have 24/7 operations at these ports on the West Coast? What role does automation play? How can the dock workers, who obviously have played an important role and even through COVID, suffered a lot of their own issues, how do they fit into the picture still? So I think now there's a really big rethink of how to get that infrastructure boosted. Of course, the Biden administration has offered some funding for that. So the next few years should be interesting in terms of how that plays out.
The next few years, but at the same time, let's talk about the next few months, because as you mentioned, there are some critical moments coming ahead that the supply chain could see more pressure due to increased volumes on the demand side. So what evidence is there to know that the supply side can really keep up in terms of the ability to kind of cross from one side to the other?
It's a huge question on everyone's mind. Obviously, the consumer rules the American economy, and with more and more calls growing of a recession, the idea that there could be a disruption at the port, something akin to what we had even 6 months ago or worse because of a labor disruption, that's very scary, I think, to people. And so, the sides came out today and acknowledged that and said, no one wants a further strain on the economy right now. The Biden administration's involved with the talks. They've reached the highest levels. So there is a sense that no one wants a strike to happen and that everyone wants to come to a happy conclusion. But of course, labor talks can get very strained. And so I think, again, we'll have to see in the coming weeks. There's no strike today. Talks are continuing. We'll have to see down the line, though, what the next step is.